Hi, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's session. My name is Jamie Bennett, and I am here for many reasons, one of which, the one that's perhaps most germane, is that I worked with President Silver's mother at the National Endowment for the Arts for 4 years. So I am here as a proud friend of mom's for the weekend. And I'm lucky enough to run an organization called ArtPlace America, which is an organization, it's a collaboration among 14 foundations, and together we're investing through a frame that we refer to as creative placemaking. And creative placemaking is sort of a new term for work that's been going on for a very long time. We use it to refer to projects where people are doing art with the explicit intention of changing a community. So the art is the doing, and the place is the thing that's changing. And since we're here with some performing arts folks, I will point out that the work goes back all the way to ancient Greece, when you had the theater was the physical as well as sort of the spiritual and the social center of those communities. So I really do mean, in fact, that this work is ancient. So I've been asked, I'm thrilled to have been asked to moderate a conversation with 3 new friends and colleagues, each of whom has a connection to Bennington, the college, and the town, and each of whom is involved with a really exciting arts organization. So we're going to run through a conversation for probably about 30 minutes where we set a little context, talk about each of you, talk about each of your organizations, and then we're really interested in then opening it up to a conversation among the people on stage, but also with all of you who are here in the audience. So I'm going to take my seat and kick things off with Judy, who's immediately to my left. And I'm going to ask you to just say a word, Judy, about A, what is your connection to Bennington? And then 2, tell us a little bit about the community that you're currently living in. And then 3, tell us a little bit about the arts organization that you run.
I can remember that much.
All right, yes.
I can remember.
How do you know Bennington? We'll do these one at a time.
I'm a Bennington graduate. I might be the oldest alumna in this room. I graduated in 1955. I'm a student of Paul Feely and Dan Shapiro, an art major. And of course, loved the college, and then went off to do a variety of different things. After, I don't know, maybe 8 years after graduation, I moved with a husband and 2 young children, practically in diapers, to a very rural community in upstate New York. And I know for people who are in Manhattan, upstate is anything north of Yonkers, but this is actually... This is Columbia County, which in those days I had never heard of.
And specifically Chatham, New York.
And specifically Chatham, thank you. Yes, where I have now lived for nearly 50 years. I've always been involved in the performing arts, not so much as a dancer, but as an attendee. Growing up in Manhattan, all the dance companies, my parents were friends of musicians and all that sort of thing. So I moved, I thought maybe away from all that, and had these children and had chickens and sort of a farm, and it was the whole thing that people do to regain some control over their lives. And at some point about 10 years ago, or maybe for longer ago than that, I began thinking, wouldn't it be great if, that's always the kind of thing. And now, be careful what you wish for, because now, 10 years later, the if sort of came to pass. And I am now the proud president of PS21 Inc. in Chatham, New York, which stands for Performing Spaces for the 21st Century. We are not a public school, but we are a hopefully public space. And so this will be our 9th season of seasonal performing arts under a beautiful tent in a rural orchard outside of the village of Chatham, New York.
I think that's perfect. Yes, no, I think that's perfect context. So to your left is Dina Janis. And Dina, what is your connection with Bennington?
Well, I've been on the faculty here, I guess, 15, 16 years, amazingly. I came from New York, where I worked in the theater for a long time, and I started teaching acting and drama here. Amazingly, 15 years later, I'm here, and it's still a really wonderful part of my life. About 4 or 5 years ago, through a playwright that I knew, playwright Teresa Rebeck, there was the theater that was in my town. I live in Dorset, Vermont, and have actually lived up there the whole time I've been teaching.
And Dorset's about how far away from Bennington?
It's about 45 minutes north. Exactly 45 minutes north. I know. I've tried every route. But the theater festival was a festival that was in the village of Dorset. It had been there, it's now in its 39th year, but at that time, about several years ago, it was in a pretty troubling condition. It had lost its sort of main artistic director years before and had just been kind of struggling to sort of right itself. So the infrastructure was in very bad shape, but the festival building itself was this amazing old, originally 2 barns that had been put together by locals and had recently been renovated for several $1 million. So it was a like state-of-the-art facility, and it just seemed, I mean, Teresa was encouraging it in the sense that it just had so much potential to become more engaged in the region rather than simply just being, a very small summer festival. So I kind of came on board there, and it's my 5th summer, and we've been doing a whole bunch of different work, and we've actually diversified what we do there quite a bit, so that there's a lot of new play development, music and art and that kind of thing. So sort of using the theater itself as a resource for the entire region in a lot of different ways. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. We're still building forward.
Excellent, fantastic. Yeah. And to your left, we have Matthew Perry. And Matthew, your connection to the college is as a neighbor, among other things, yes?
Yes, we are housed just down the road, within walking distance. And I moved to North Bennington in 1990, and 4 years later, discovered this old mill and had a studio in it, and it kind of grew into the Vermont Arts Exchange. So we're a 20-year-old nonprofit arts organization this year, and was able to obtain the building at an auction when it went up for a tax sale, and then was able to, we were the first arts organization in the state to go for a community development block grant, and then also get some funding from the Historic Preservation Trust of Vermont, and kind of put together a rehab project, which is still going on, and to bring everything that we're doing to get the building, bring it up to code and everything like that. And so our mission is really bringing arts to people of all ages, abilities, and income. We are cradle to grave, with a focus on youth at risk and elders with dementia and developmentally delayed adults. And then we also work with the community with summer arts camps and a concert series and parades and all kinds of things that kind of engage community.
That's fantastic. So the topic that's brought us all together is the intersection of the arts and the communities that we sort of live in. And let me start where we ended with you, Matthew. We talked about a very specific project, and I think you've got a couple show and tell examples next to you. Talk a little bit about something that was going on in the community and the thing that you saw as a possibility that you guys could help address.
Yeah, I think, one of the things we're moving forward to more is this sort of art as a vehicle, and not as a product as much, and trying to get the arts out as more of a service to the community, that we do more than decorate and entertain, and that, although that's important, we can provide other services to other people. A residency in Starksboro, Vermont that I did, we went into a mobile home park, and we're trying to address some of the issues that they were challenged with, and one of them was speeding. And so we gathered, we have this mobile art bus. It's a black school bus that's a traveling studio, and we would go in, we sort of set up a schedule of 6 sessions and went in with the kids and talked about them working, what's going on in their community, and then it finally got around to the speeding, and that the roads were literally their playground, so it wasn't a safe area. So we wanted to, and that people weren't paying attention to the speed signs, so we decided to make our own. And so we went through drawing and typography sort of lessons and classes, and then we had these signs printed up on aluminum, and they say "Slow Children," and they were a big success, and to this day they traffic has been slowed down, which is, I always like to check in on these projects to make sure they're still working. And it actually triggered throughout the rural community, because a lot of people were like, well, I want one on my street. And people started finding out that, there's only so much feet on your property that you own and that the town owns. And we went to the state to see if we could do this, and there was a lot of red tape there. So we decided that we were going to just do this on our own, and people were starting to order them, and we were going to put them around the community.
And you sort of began this by making an important point that there's both artistic product, right? There's the commodity, but there's also the process, actually the doing, the process.
Right. I mean, there was an actual product.
Right. And so this has both of them.
Right.
But I could have gone to a sign maker and just had slow children signs printed up and stuck them up. Right. But I think these work differently because of the process. So will you just dive a little deeper into that bit of it and what it meant to have the children working on it?
Yeah, there's the ownership. We did a project right here in Bennington at Willowbrook years ago where we took grapevine on this chain link fence that you drove in along this housing complex. And we took grapevine and we spelled welcome to Willowbrook. And everyone said, oh, it's going to get torn down, the kids are going to break it. But the kids did it. They were involved with it and they were invested in it. And, it stayed up for like 2 or 3 years, and maybe a letter would fall, but it was only because it cracked and, and we'd replace it. But I think that getting the kids involved, and then you get the parents involved, and the parents hear what the kids, how excited they are and how invested they are. And I think that it kind of has a reciprocal effect.
It's great.
Yeah.
Dina, one of the things that I think when people talk about community, we often kind of talk about community as if it's static, right? As if it's 100 people living in 100 houses for 100 years. But you've seen a lot of changes, I think, in Dorset. Some in the wake of 9/11, some sort of as natural evolution. Talk a little bit for a minute just about some of the communities that exist within the community of Dorset, and then just talk for a minute about some of the work that you guys are doing to try and unite those communities physically in the theater, but more importantly, as a sort of public place where all of them can interact.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm a parent in the community, so I had the perspective of having my kids growing up there, which was really useful. But it's a very, in a way, fragmented community in the sense that you have a lot of second homers from Boston and New York or elsewhere, former CEOs of, American Express or, a partner at Ernst & Young or whatever. And that's their sort of idyllic country retreat. And then you have a lot of what we would refer to as non-flatlanders who live there, have been there for generations, many of whom are farmers or loggers or at this time, I think I would have to say, trying to figure out how to have a sustainable future in the region economically, because it's very challenging, especially for young people, to find a way of staying here. Vermont has one of the highest percentages of young people who end up having to leave before they somehow make their way back because they do love it. So it's a really interesting mix. And then you have, kind of a tourist base of, just the summer vacationer that's always been a part of the southern Vermont region. And I think I have to say, we're still, what I knew when I came on board was that I really was important to me. The festival, I think, had been a kind of a entertainment for the very wealthy, not at all diverse community that would pay for tickets. And that model had totally failed. So I had, in a sense, a great opportunity to reinvent that and not be worried about losing anything by doing that. But I knew that, in a way, inclusion and diversity was really important to me if I was going to spend all the energy doing this. So I just tried to actually, and I'm still in this process, I think, outreach to every organization, church leaders, business owners, wealthy homeowners, farmers, the military. The National Guard in Vermont has been hit very heavily by all the ongoing wars. Many of the National Guard members here have been in deployment multiple times. And, just inviting a conversation and sitting down with them over coffee or whatever and asking them, what can this theater be? What should it be? What would be good for it to become? Because I always felt like a theater should be the kitchen table of the community. And Joe Papp is my biggest hero. And, I just really thought, if I'm going to do this, can we do that? So that, I guess, I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning. I think it's a listening moment for us, even though I'm 5 years in, certainly listening to ideas for programming, which range everywhere, you can imagine. But programming becomes important because you're making a choice to tell stories that have diverse storylines to them, instead of just, Agatha Christie or Alan Ayckbourn. What can we do to really include the diverse population here and also tell stories that are not normally told here? So I guess I feel like I'm still in the process, maybe early, of really just engaging the community by opening the door and saying, again, it's this idea of ownership. This is something we're going to build now. What should we build it into? What do you need it to be? And I found out a lot of really interesting things about the needs in this region, which I, living here, did not know. Economic issues that exist. There's a lot of complexity in a rural environment that the state survives very heavily on a tourist economy. And there's a real tension between those things, I think. So, I would say, in terms of what I've learned about the community is that it's complex, but there are certain givens about people who end up here really care a lot about the environment. They care a lot about education and their children. They really care about that. They care a lot about civil discourse, which is hugely respected in Vermont, and it's very admirable in that way. And so I think that you begin to get a sense of, oh, okay, well, this is what a theater or this building, which is, I like to think of it more as a host for a lot of things, can open the doors to those kinds of conversations. And we're still in the conversation point, I think, really in a listening place of really hearing what people think.
It tends to be our libraries, our theaters,
Totally.
these public spaces that in some ways are neutral and
Totally.
can convene
Right.
folks who might otherwise only convene in subsets.
Yeah.
Judy, how far away is Chatham, New York from Bennington?
here?
Yeah.
1 hour and 14 minutes.
And I think there's some things, 1 hour and 14
13.
someone who's driven it since 1956.
It's a little exact.
There are some things I'm guessing you've heard in the description of North Bennington and in Dorset that sound very familiar,
Well, I was
and there are
gonna
some
say.
things that I think are very different.
Yeah.
So talk for a minute about Chatham, and let's talk about the role that PS21 plays in
Well,
Chatham.
first I will say that Chatham, I think, years ago was very much like Dorset, although I would have to, this is a little aside,
Yeah.
off topic for a moment. When I was in college, Adlai Stevenson was running for his first term, do you remember that? And I was going to go pamphlet and stuff, and they said to me, "Oh, you can't stay in Vermont. It's it's wasted. You waste your energy. Go to somewhere else, some progressive place like Williamstown."
Right.
So, I mean, Vermont has changed. And we now consider Vermont one of the most progressive, advanced states in the country, ahead on everything. And it's been a mere 60 years or something. I don't know how long it's been, but anyway, that's. So anyway, Chatham was, when we moved to Chatham, it was sort of the end of the large farm era. People were discouraged, the farmers were not doing well, milk prices were low, people were selling off their farms, and of course, something had to take the place of that. And it was slow going, because politics, of course, and governance is always sort of behind maybe what the people's wishes are. But I would say that very much all the things that Dina has said about Dorset are more or less true about Chatham. Except that, now you would like me to talk about probably what's different about Chatham. We have not had, we have had a change of, a huge change in demographics, I would say, over the past 15 years. And Chatham has become kind of a destination, sort of trendy. Columbia County, which I had never heard of, has now become something you read about in the New York Times. But let me tell you that when you read about it, it's all wrong. So don't pay attention. But one of the things that I was passionate about.
Judy, let me just do this.
Oh, and of course
that's
I'm.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Yes.
This is so adorable. I wish I had one like this.
Leave it right where it is. Keep talking. All right.
Go around the world.
Right.
Did you hear what I said there? Mr. Lasky, did you hear me? Oh, that's a private joke.
That's God telling Judy to talk less. No.
I think he
That was
heard you.
what my late husband used to say. He said, stop talking while I'm interrupting. Anyway.
Right. Talk.
Anyway, well, what we have discovered in this PS21 thing, first of all, the idea was to bring stuff that you didn't normally have in the area. And we do live in an area where there's a lot going on in the summer. There are a lot of summer music festivals and so on in the Berkshires. But we're kind of like the poor stepchild of the Berkshires. And I have spent most of my 50 years in Columbia County trying to get people from the Berkshires to know that there's something over here. You know, it's not just over there. But so we have our own little space. And one of the things that we wanted to do was try to involve local people in even some of our productions, which has turned out to be really successful. We did a production of Our Town a few years ago, and I understand that there's a production of Our Town every single day of the year all over the world or something.
Amazing. It's one of the most produced plays.
But
It's never gone out of production since it was first
but it's
produced.
an amazing, amazing play. And we thought, well, how can we involve the community actively? And there is the role of the professor, which you probably know is kind of a small role, but important. So we got a whole lot of neighborhood people to come, local people, to share that role for the 13 nights or the 11 nights that we did the play. Well, it was a great success because, first of all, naturally they wanted their families to come, their kids to come. They were so excited they were going to be on the stage. We said to them, don't be nervous. You don't have to memorize your lines. You can read them if you want to. But many of them memorized them, and for some of them it was the first time they'd ever been on the stage, maybe since the High School Musical. So what we've tried to expand on that every year. We try to find some way to include some of the local population. We have series of movies, for example, that are free, mostly on music and dance themes. But then every year we've started to do this. We have one series of films on a certain topic. For example, the year that we had the Our Town play, the topic was small town life, the international sort of small film festival. So we would get people in the community who were kind of familiar with the subject or the country or the language or something to come and introduce the film. Then we had, last year we had a film on food film fest, which was amazing, and then comedy and then whatever. This year it's mostly dancers and dance makers. One of the things that our own government has gotten to see is that now, even though there are some small farmers coming back, young people who are looking for small pieces of land to farm, it's still not a center part of the economy anymore. And they have understood now that the arts are what bring people to the community. And even if they didn't know how to spell art or culture or whatever it is a few years ago, they're on board with it. And we don't want them just to be on board with it. We want them to come and see how exciting this stuff is. You know, you don't have to know a whole lot to love a performance of, say, Parsons Dance, who's been with us every summer now for 9 years. And it's amazing, people who said, oh, I wouldn't go see modern dance. I don't even know what that is. And we say, well, just come on, we'll bring your friends, we'll discount the tickets, we'll bring you in from Main Street, whatever we had to do. And they came and they say, oh my God, this is amazing. So that's kind of, I don't even know if I answered
No, I think that's perfect. And one of the things that Judy talked about, Dina, came up when you and I were talking, which was a little bit about the sort of changing local economy, right?
Yeah.
It went from one that was very much driven by agriculture to one that was sort of devastated, and now we're seeing some things about local food springing up, and some connections that you guys have been able to make with sort of local art. I think there's sort of a corollary between local art, local food, know your farmer, know your food, know your artist, know your art. So talk a little bit about that and some of the cheese.
Yeah, I mean,
Because I love
think,
cheese.
Real estate was a big driving thing for the region, I think. And of course, with the economic crisis, that totally changed. And, most of the businesses, even in Manchester, which is a real outlet place, actually, oddly, were closed. I mean, there's shuttered storefront after shuttered storefront. And I think that, I think of it in a way like the festival. The festival was in such dire shape that it was both a difficult, almost close your door moment for these towns in this region, but it was also an opportunity to think about what is really sustainable. What are the seeds we really want to plant here? And this idea of localvore, or there's another word for it, buy local. There's a big buy local movement here. And that it really struck me as a way to think about what we could help facilitate as an arts organization. And one of the outcomes of simply meeting with everyone, from the baker to the, to the local arts leaders, was partnerships. People needed to forge partnerships and were really interested in doing that. And in the southern Vermont region, oddly, the state has not really focused any resources, particularly on this area, for the arts. I mean, they think of it as it's mostly the tourism is based primarily on recreation, skiing, canoeing, all of the great things, Vermont hiking, cheese, barns, sheep, farms, knitting, whatever, all of which is wonderful, right? But there are some major, state-of-the-art arts organizations in the southern region, and most of the focus in the state was really Chittenden County, Burlington, which of course made sense because Burlington's a happening city and colleges are there and whatever. So we went, I kind of got together some arts organizations, Weston Playhouse and Southern Vermont Arts Center and Manchester Music Festival, and we just kind of got in our car on a January day and went and met with the governor and said, this region needs help. And here are the things we do down here. And we need, we've formed this partnership. Can you support it? And I think that's a model that, honestly, I think, to tell you the truth, I learned a lot of that kind of thinking from here. Right. How do you collaborate? How do you think about it in terms of collaboration? And that, I think we're still, again, baby steps. But there has been a great shift. The state has really come in and supported a festival now that goes on, includes about, 30 or 40 organizations, including Old Castle. I don't know if you're involved with that or not, but it's this, the idea that they're starting to kind of try to work now business partnerships with the arts organizations and community organizations and really try to focus some energy in this direction.
And Matthew, Dina was talking some about sort of issues of localism. And Judy talked a little bit about reading an article in the New York Times about her town that she didn't recognize, right? She didn't recognize the town she lived in and what the New York Times was reporting. And I don't think there's ever been any misreporting about what life in North Bennington is like, right? The national media gets it exactly right.
It all depends who you ask.
Right. So, you guys have been very much rooted in your community in a way that's very much positioned yourself sort of by, of, and for locals, including the sort of very physical place of where Vermont Art Exchange is located. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about what that means to be an arts organization that is so specifically rooted in its place and what it means to sort of be a fellow citizen as an arts organization.
Well, I think, moving into this old mill that had a history.
And you said that was 1991? When did you move?
1994.
1994.
We had been there in 92, but in 94 we were incorporated as a 501c. Right. And just started, slowly fixing it up. And I think you know, getting the funding and getting people together, and you know, after 10 years, you know, you kind of get a certain amount of respect, and any success we've had, period, I think is due to sort of the fertile ground of North Bennington here, that it's obvious that there was a lot of support. It was the first time that the school board and the village boards came together to approve a tax abatement, because the former owner, mill owner, hadn't paid his taxes for 8 years, so there was some money that we had to deal with when we took over the building. So it was, there was a lot of support for this, and a great environment for doing it in. And having the building, although it's been hard, you know, it's over 25,000 square feet, an old brick mill. It also has really been, we've been able to grow into it. And a lot of organizations and a lot of our peers throughout the state and the region are, you know, always, if they don't have a space, it's one of their challenges. And of course, one of ours is it's a success, but it's also a challenge in keeping it going and paying for the heat and the upkeep. But it's really been an identity. Right. You know, the mill, it's really been part of, it's been a gathering place, and it's been identified as one in a sense. And it's a factory, so we now make art there, and it's a unique place, and it's a place where a lot of different things have happened besides art. Right. You know, there's a lot of, you know, there's the property, and it's also, you know, it's located in this 2 square mile village, which, you know, I don't know how many nonprofits we have in town. Melissa, do you know? A lot. A lot. Yeah, a lot. So, and we're all in many ways working together, and so that really solidifies, and it's become a meeting place, and it's become a community center in many ways.
That's fantastic. So. I want to get you guys all involved, so I'm going to open this up for questions and comments and conversation in just a second, and to give you guys a chance to gather your thoughts. Let's just do a quick lightning round with you guys. Each of you has spent time in an urban setting, and each of you is now making your home in a more rural, less metropolitan area. Tell me one of the best things about it and one of the most challenging things about it. Let me start with Judy. One of the best things about living in a place like Chatham, New York.
Okay. One of the best things about living in a place like Chatham is that you get to know people that you might not know if you were living in a very small community in New York City. People that I've had no idea, you begin to get into their heads, understand their thought processes, understand how, you know, where they're coming from. And it's interesting. Now, the other thing is they know all about you, they know about your children. You can't walk down the street without somebody asking you a question. They know what's happening at the restaurant, they know what's happening there. And that's, you know, that's a really good thing, but it's also a bad thing.
Excellent. All right, so you did both in one. Well done.
Right, exactly.
Excellent. Dina, a really wonderful thing about working in the non-metropolitan area and a really challenging thing.
I think, well, it's the first thing that came to mind, which seems like an odd thing to say, but it's the power of the natural environment, this sense of incredible beauty that everyone values here, from the farmers who farm the land to the loggers who log the land to the people who are here because it's just really has a power. Right. And I think that really feeds the kind of work that happens here in a lot of ways. And then I think the hardest thing is that it's really far away from New York City, where my general artistic tribe lives. Although with the festival that's mediated a little because they can come up for the summer. But it's a rough commute to New York. I would say that's maybe for me, personally, one of the harder things.
Excellent. Yeah. Matthew, really wonderful thing about North Bennington, working in North Bennington, and a challenging thing.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've never really lived in an urban area. I try to, you know, visit those places. And I think that...
throw peanuts at the locals.
Yeah. I think that I just love the quiet because I seem to have a lot of chaos in my life, and sort of create that, I think, myself. And I have 4 boys and young boys, and so it's I've always liked, even before the boys, it was always a place where I could find quietness, and I think the challenge, I think, is designing your time so that you can go away, because it does get very quiet.
Right. Right. That's great. All right, so I'd love to open things up to anyone who has a question, a comment, something they'd like to engage in a conversation with. Hey, tell us a word about who you are so we know who we're talking with.
My name's Mark. I'm from Bennington, Vermont. We're
Excellent.
starting a new organization to revitalize Memorial Hall, which is a 112-year-old theater. And my question kind of circles back into Dorset, into North Bennington. Bennington, we had 10 feet of water downtown.
Yeah,
Right.
huge.
Going on 3 years ago, and it feels like the arts are a vital part of rebuilding space and place and community, and I'm wondering if there's anything with your organization you can say about post-Irene and community building.
Yeah.
Have each of you dealt at all with sort of natural disaster disruption? Not in Chatham,
Not
Dorset,
that
yes.
We were lucky the theater wasn't hit, but I know my dear colleague at Weston, they had just renovated the entire rehearsal studios down, and they were totally destroyed. And it's a real galvanizing point, but I think you're right. The artistic community can become a place that's just a place where people can come to actually start thinking out of the damage. That I know the town you're talking about was totally wiped out, wasn't it? And yeah, I think it's a good community builder to be able to create an opportunity for people to come together around whatever work you're trying to produce.
And I was having a conversation at lunch, and my predecessor at ArtPlace was a woman called Carol Coletta, and she was interviewing the then mayor of Newark, New Jersey, a guy called Cory Booker, now Senator Booker. And she asked him what the most difficult thing about being mayor was. What's the single most difficult thing about being mayor? And he thought for a minute, and then he said something which I've been fascinated by ever since. Getting residents to believe that tomorrow can be different, right? And so particularly after you've been devastated by a natural disaster, that's become your reality, right? The 10 feet of water, the detritus, has become your reality. And I think the arts can be pretty powerful in imagining a different future, imagining slower cars, imagining what it would look like if we rebounded. So I think there's a really important thing in terms of that connection with planning, with imagination, and with possibility, as well as everything else. But yeah, excellent. Absolutely, and sorry, say a word about who you are. Just say who we're talking with. Excellent. And you wanted to talk a little bit about New Orleans.
It's a big amazing coming back, and the vitality of the music that kept everything alive.
Totally.
It was great to see.
Right, absolutely.
I think it's seeing it as an it's, you have to see it maybe not the next day, but maybe the day after. Let's say, what is the opportunity here if you can see that?
I think there is
the
one...
way Dots, I think, did. Dots pulled themselves together.
And the national press represents Dots as well.
Right.
I think there's one interesting point, though, that I think the arts have to be an advocate for getting help, because one of the fallouts of the flooding was that the community here was amazing. They didn't wait for FEMA money. Every guy with a backhoe was out there fixing the roads. I mean, that's Vermont, right, which was so amazing. But what also happened was that the funding and foundations, that a lot of whom were supporting the arts organizations, really reevaluated where they put their support, because they had whole towns that were wiped out. And there is a fallout from that for nonprofits in the state, and I think the arts organizations really have to advocate to the state for making sure they don't completely forget about those commitments, because without the arts surviving this, you would have a different kind of fallout. So I think there's something to be said for, contacting your representatives and making sure they don't totally rechannel everything.
We've been working as an organization at getting this into a really clever talking point, and it's not there yet. But particularly in the wake of a lot of disasters, there's a lot of focus on necessities and providing people with their bed and their bath. But a lot of times, wait for it, we forget about the beyond. But I think it really is, come on, that's really good. But I think a lot of times, I know down in New York City, after the
Yeah,
hurricane,
same thing, the
people were
sand.
placed in temporary housing
Yeah.
situations, and they were given a cot and 3 hots, and then just told to exist like that for 6 months. And if you don't have the arts, if
Right.
you don't have cultural expression, if we don't have stories,
So
if we
it's-
don't have visual stimulus, you're not fully human, and we're not allowing people to sort of be fully alive in who they are. So I really think sort of combining that in. But anyway, yes, hi, right here. Hi, who are you?
Alyssa,
Hi, hi, Alyssa.
I live in North Bennington, and I think I would call my organization a creative placemaker. Although
Excellent.
Not necessarily, specifically defined that way. And I used to live in New York City, and I have sort of 2 questions. One is that one of the things that I find significantly different between an urban experience and a rural experience in trying to run a creative organization is the lack of money. And even in situations where there are larger opportunities with large federal funders, there's often a local match. And in a small community like this, it's almost impossible even to come up with the local match to even achieve the kind of application threshold. So in terms of finding resources from outside of the state to flow in for creative endeavors, I think it's a really important mission for individual organizations and for the state as a whole, because I think not just the creative work, but in all sorts of human services or social change initiatives, if money's not going to come in from the outside, we're going to keep being small with our answers to the challenges. But the other thing, in a way it's related and also to this issue about disasters, is I do participatory research work too, and one of the things that I do social change work, and it's important, I think, to come up with a different set of metrics for what it is that we're helping people change, and how that gets identified, how it gets measured, and how it gets communicated back to decision makers, because I feel as if the type of work that everyone here is engaged in that involves people's hearts and souls and their sense of possibility for the future is so important and so undervalued in the world of data and outcome measures and all of those things that we hear about in our world, and that finding a way to measure and track that and show change is a really crucial thing for creative work and arts community.
I think that's such an important point, and I think a lot of us, particularly on the creative side, get scared of that conversation and get scared of sort of the O words, right? Outcomes and objectives and all of that. And one of the things that we're trying to do as an organization is break that down into plainer language. And what we want to have a conversation with folks about is, what are you trying to do? And how are you going to know whether you've done it? And I think a lot of arts organizations tend to measure the wrong things because we tend to measure easy things.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to measure how many tickets you've sold. So we like sort of reporting on that, but I don't think that's the mission of many of our organizations, is to sell more tickets. So I think we need to take an active role in doing that. So when we talk about our organizations, we actually say, I'm an organization, here's what I'm looking to change, and here's how I'm going to know whether I've changed it, rather than just sort of saying, well, we like to do art and we want to do more art and art is good, sort of stuff, which is a true thing, but it, isn't necessarily going to be effective as an advocacy tool. Hi, way over here. Who are you?
I'm Kit. I'm an alumna of Bennington. I've also been involved in a farm in Londonderry, which is 35 miles north of here. And a few years ago, a couple of farmers got together and put together something called Southern Vermont Farm Trail. Published on the web, it was various places, and it was actually instigated by one farmer who said to all of the farmers and some of the small craft people in the area, nobody knows who we are individually, but if we all get together, this would work. You talk about the disparate views, and I'm very involved in the arts where I live now. I'm also very involved in farming. Sometimes they don't seem to mesh, but I'm just wondering if the possibility of the arts community here reaching out to some of the farm community, why not have a trail that is Vermont farm and art trail. I mean,
Right.
you know, there's a farm in Londonderry that's
Right.
on this, or the cheesemakers on Route 11. Why should the Weston Playhouse be on it? Why shouldn't Dorset?
Right.
I mean, combining those two and working together for the benefit, you know, and if you
Yeah.
have an event, have a food truck from a local farm be there, all that aspect of things, to bring some of the people who, I'm not going to get involved in those artsy people,
Well,
or the arts people who aren't quite sure how to deal with diet and so forth.
it's interesting you mention that, because one of the first things we did was do what we call a giving back program, where we had underwritten by people who cared about various groups, including farmers, free tickets to all farmers everywhere. So tell your friends in Londonderry, all farmers, local farmers, and their families can come to the Dorset Theatre Festival for free all summer long. And I have to say, at first it was like a hard sell, because these farmers were like proud, they didn't want any handouts, what's a play, blah, blah, blah. But then eventually, some of those youngsters you talk about that now are so interested in agriculture again, started coming, and we now get droves of farmers coming in. And they bring their little kids, and they come, and it's like one of the most rewarding things is to be able to support the local farmers, because they work their butts off. And they struggle, and it's a giving back idea that one of those moment things that just meant a lot to me to be able to
Love that, Dina, and I'm going to do that
And I mean,
this summer.
They like coming to plays.
And I was just going to say, just as a follow-up, there's an organization that is a favorite of both Joan and mine called Worm Farm in Sauk County, Wisconsin, which runs something called the Farm Art Detour. So the roadside food stands that sell produce are actually being designed by artists. And then the artists are also doing large-scale temporary artworks in the farms to try and get the tourist community off the roads and actually visiting the farms. So if you'd like to, I'd be happy to make a connection, because there's a woman called Donna Newworth who's extraordinary, who I would be happy to sort of share what they've learned. And what's interesting is they've become a site, to the earlier question, they've become a site of a lot of national funding, National Endowment for the Arts, ArtPlace, others, and they actually have a problem because their local community now thinks they're too rich, right? As an organization in a rural community, they've had a lot of outside funding, and now they're actually having a hard time fundraising because everyone sees them as the rich kid. You know, they're the sort of Lincoln Center of Sauk County, Wisconsin, and no one wants to give to it. Yeah, hi.
Art is certainly a part of rebuilding Detroit.
Right.
But my question to the panel is, have you seen the challenges that school districts in your areas are facing with cuts to the arts, and have you been part of the conversation in trying to restore that or make investment in the arts with our students?
Yeah, please, Judy, jump in.
Okay.
You need permission?
No, but I mean, I didn't know if anyone else wanted to leap in.
No,
Just
jump in.
Don't mind, you can interrupt me if you want. Well, we're trying in Chatham, you know, this is interesting because my kids went through the public school Chatham School District years ago. And the one thing that Chatham has, they still have the orchestra and the string program, thank God, because my son David, you know, started violin when he was 8 or whatever it was. But what we're trying to do now with dance, for example, because there is no dance in the school, and they haven't cut back yet on a lot of the arts programs, but they haven't expanded them either. So what we are trying to partner with the school to get some dance, some choreographers to come in and do workshops with the kids. We do some summer workshops as well, but we are trying to do that, and you have to make up, I mean, we could lobby the school board forever and nothing will ever happen, you know, in the state, but we have to take it on ourselves to just do this and, you know, make friends with the administration and say, this is really important and we want to do this. That's the best that we can do at the moment.
And Matthew, you work with a lot of public school students, although not necessarily in the schools.
Yeah, a lot of them are through special programs, working with youth at risk, but you know, getting into the public system, you know, for the 20 years that we've been doing it, it's still a struggle.
It is.
The money just isn't there. We talk about coming to a field trip to VAE, and they don't even have the money to get a bus. It's really difficult. The state arts, you know, there is money in the State Arts Council for school residencies, but it's not what it used to be. So we're trying to work more and actually look at, like in the middle school, for example, when you enter 7th grade, you don't get art until March. So but then they get it twice a week. So there's other issues that I have issues with, that a kid doesn't have art at all week. And I mean visual art. He might have band or concert or, a chorus, but visual art, being creative, using your hands. Wood shops are almost a thing of the past in schools. Making birdhouses and shelves, and what I did when I was young. And in this age of technology and kids going home and playing on the computers and games, they're just not, getting outside and,
And one of the hard things about working
houses.
And one of the realities of NCLB and working the setting is you have to teach within license, and there are only 4 recognized art forms in the public school: dance, music, theater, and visual art. So things like woodworking have to come in under something like visual art. Technology doesn't exist as a standalone thing, film media.
Industrial arts.
So it's really complicated. Can I put you on the spot, speaking of intersections between schools and communities, to talk a little bit about what we were talking about last night? Yes, absolutely. No, just because this was, stand up and talk a little bit about the class you're involved with. Say who you are in the class you're involved with. It's your fault for sitting next to someone who asked the question.
I am Christopher. I'm a second-year student here at Bennington, and I'm taking the class as well.
Who's a professor of architecture, for anyone who doesn't know Donald by sight.
And we were working with, looking at the intersection between the school and downtown Bennington, and how students can engage in the community down there. And it's been a big learning experience for us, trying to figure out how we engage with the town, and how the town engages back. It's been an interesting thing. I guess one of the difficulties has been figuring out sort of places where, public spaces where people come together and can enjoy each other and enjoy, music or performance, other things like that. And looking for opportunities to create those spaces in downtown Bennington so that people can really sort of come together as a community and enjoy those things. And those are things that we've been looking at as students, as, what will take us downtown, what will get people up to college, and what are the difficulties, why are we not seeing that now? We're looking at transportation, the difficulties with just the fact that it's hard for students to get down there, but also the lack of sort of community performance spaces that are outdoors and really in the open that people are able to actively engage with. So it's been, it's very
I mean, you sort of last night you articulated as there's no way to get there and there's nothing to do there once you do. Yeah. That's fantastic.
So it is happening, and with the spaces, there are spaces, yes, and there are people to talk to.
Excellent. Absolutely. And do you and Christopher know each other? Excellent. Excellent. I want you guys to keep knowing each other and keep talking. Fabulous. Hi. Yes, right here.
Hi. I'm Anna Rosenboy. I work for Jacob's Pillow, which is one of those festivals in Berkshire that take all the papers. But
because it's all about a competition, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ella is on my advisory board, by the way.
She's wonderful. I'm wondering if one or more of you could speak to the challenge of presenting and facilitating arts programming in communities of diverse backgrounds where people have various degrees of arts literacy, and how you continue to make work that's both thoughtful and accessible.
I think providing a variety is really important. making, with the Basement Music Series we've been doing for 10 years, brings in, it was originally started to bring in sort of, world-class, like Grammy-nominated people like Omar Sosa, a pianist from Cuba, and Tuvan throat singers, and then different people sort of melded into 80% Brooklyn bands, and then it sort of, I started slowly bringing in local bands, and I realized, by doing that, it was bringing in this huge local audience that had never been there before. So now I look at presenting differently by bringing in, just changing things up a lot, and looking at who am I going to bring in the door by who I present. And lately we've been doing a lot of collaborations in the past 4 years with students. And last week they were in residence all week doing a play, and Friday and Saturday I think there were about 500. I think someone said today the whole campus pretty much was there over the Friday and Saturday event, and probably 80% of them had never been in the building. So I think changing that up and looking at who's in your community and what can you present that can bring in that audience.
Yeah. Do you want to jump in?
Programming is a really, it's a very creative and fascinating process, but I kind of made the decision, truthfully, to sort of, to try to honor the community, in the traditional community that was there. The theater festival made most of its money on Agatha Christie's one play that they would produce every summer. Agatha Christie is wonderful, not my favorite playwright, but what I found out was in deciding to go for plays that I felt were about something, that I felt I didn't want to make the assumption that the local community wouldn't understand Clybourne Park or Superior Donuts or a play with some language in it, because, for God's sake, everybody's on their television, and the Coca-Cola ad has more graphic nudity in it than, you know what I'm trying to say? So I thought, let me throw out that assumption and just see what happens if I mix it. I do the Agatha Christie, but I do the, Noel Coward, or I do the whatever, just pure great play comedy, but I bring in some plays that I think have something to say about now, and also have some diverse stories, that aren't just an all-white, wealthy universe. And what was ironic, because we had nowhere to go further down, so there was nothing to lose, so I don't give myself a lot of credit for taking a risk in that way, like Jacob's Pillow might. But what I found was that the plays that we did that were new and were about something did just as well that first year or two as the old mainstay stuff. And now it's the stuff that people want us to do. So I actually had huge discovery in that, not assuming I understood what would resonate with people. Because I think at the end of the day, if it's a really truthful, meaningful story that's about human experience, whether it's got a couple swear words in it or whatever, they'll really respond to it. And I don't know how that plays out with dance, but...
I think it's so interesting. The person I always quote about this, which always shocks art audiences, is I don't think there's a smarter person on this issue than Newt Gingrich. Because after the last national election, he talked about the problem of outreach. And a lot of us talk about audience outreach. And he was saying the GOP was busy doing outreach, and it was the same four old white guys sitting at a table figuring out what they wanted to do, and then not understanding why everyone else wasn't buying into it. So this notion, I think, of listening to your audiences, hearing them, entering into a dialogue with them, and sort of saying, what is the thing that we want to do together, is really exciting.
Well, I was going to say,
only because we're at the end of our hour.
Very fast. If you want to see, and I know the programming is incredible art and science, and I never get tired of thinking about it and thinking about it. There are some free brochures from last summer You'll get an idea of the diversity of the programming that we do. We don't have as vast a variety of people as you might have in a city. That's one of the missing things about it, not having a city. But we have a variety of different populations in the country. So if you check those out, you can take one with you. Our new one just went to press, so we don't have that. And that's what we try to do.
Fantastic. So we've reached the end of our hour. And just before we thank our panel, just as a quick scan for me, how many people in this room have been to see something that one of these three organizations have done?
Oh, awesome.
Excellent, excellent. Who didn't just raise their hand? All right, so do you guys, look, these are the people I need you to talk with afterwards, all right? Excellent. Please join me in thanking Matthew, Dina, and Judy for a great conversation.
They were all in your place because they're not in front of the rest.